Those in Ohio, though, so I'm not going to be too worried about that. But
Yeah, you have your whole set of problems up there with the snow and the floods and the
good
tornadoes.
Lord. Wow. Boring? You are not boring, my dear. Absolutely not. Wow.
Okay, well, oh wait, tell us about your book, Julie. You gotta wait till you hear this. Tell us about your book, The Chaos Coordinator. What it's about.
Well, I wrote two books, and they're on Amazon, and the first one that she's talking about is The Chaos Coordinator. And what it is when I was living in Washington, way up there alone, because I was alone a lot of the times, I had an injury, and they told me that I probably would never walk again. And I sat there for 2 years in a chair and thought, oh boy, this is my life. And before, I was very athletic and I did all this stuff. So I decided one day I was going to learn to walk, and I would go out to my horses, and my kids would help me up on my horses, and I would ride around bareback, and pretty soon things snapped back into place, and I can walk now. And I shot mounted archery competitively,
Wow.
and that got me up and getting around again. But while I was sitting on my, pudgy butt, when I wasn't doing anything, I was writing short stories and sending them to the local newspaper. I had a newspaper column, and I called it Imagine That. And basically, the premise of it was because when my husband died, my boys were 8 and 2, and they never really knew their dad. And he was gone for 2 years before he died, and off and on throughout their whole lives. So my youngest didn't even really know his dad at all. And so I had a professor once that said, we lose who we are, our family history and everything within 3 generations, because people may know something about your parents, but you may not know anything about your grandparents, and most people don't know anything about their great-grandparents. So I started taking stories of trying to raise my boys and learning to raise and grow our own food. I could always grow garden things, but I had never butchered or done anything like that. And we had to do that when I was raising my boys. So I started writing these little stories about raising the boys up in the Nile, which was what it was called where we lived. I always called it, I was living in denial. But I wrote these stories, and they became fairly popular in town. And so I figured I would put all these stories together and put them in a book. So when my kids turned 18 and graduated from high school, I'd give them a book so they would remember us.
Wow.
And so that's what I've done. And Michelle was kind enough to let me talk about them, and maybe, would you mind if I read a couple stories out of them?
No, absolutely.
Actually, I would love it.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, well, the first one was about raising chickens, and if Michelle's read this, she'll know which ones they are. But once again, this is called The Chaos Coordinator, and it's on Amazon. These were columns, and I left them exactly like I wrote them, so please bear with me. Okay. It says, I got to thinking about the column, and that got me thinking about chickens. And that got me to thinking about the chicken bucket, which is plate scrapings that we feed the chickens. And that got me thinking about the time our chickens got naked. And, well, you'll see. My boys at the time both were picky eaters. Neither would eat leftovers, so our fridge was usually filled with bowls of unidentifiable bits and pieces. Chore time in our house is to be avoided at all costs. The chicken bucket, as I said before, is where we scrape everything that's left on the plates or left too long in the fridge for human consumption. On this morning, my youngest, Gary, went to empty the chicken bucket, but it was already empty. Knowing he had to find something, he went to the fridge to see if anything was scratching at the door to be let out. He stood silently perusing the interior of the refrigerator. Finding several likely bowls, he emptied them into the chicken bucket and went out to feed the chickens. About an hour later, my oldest son wandered into the house, munching on an apple. "Chickens are dead," he stated calmly. I peered out the back door to see limp, feathered bodies scattered around the yard. 3 obviously ill chickens were still alive. One was staggering around, making noises, while another lay on the ground with a glazed look in its eye. The 3rd chicken was spinning in circles with wings outstretched. Within minutes, all these chickens lay motionless as well. I walked over and poked at a limp body with a stick a couple of times. No movement, no signs of violence. I figured the boys had finally fed them something that had killed them. This was really bad because I love my chickens. And I did love my chickens.
Aww.
I knew we couldn't eat them, but I figured I'd pluck them and use the feathers for something. I've always wanted a feather pillow. I didn't want to scald them if wet feathers stink to high heaven. So I got the boys and we sat down, plucked all the dead chickens, placing their feathers into a garbage bag and leaving their plucked scrawny bodies under a tree until I could dispose of them properly. I didn't realize at the time you only used the down of geese for pillows, not chicken feathers, but I was winging it. I ran out of garbage bags, so the boys and I hopped in the truck to go buy some more. One thing led to another, and by the time we got home, it was late. I went into the house to put the bags away when Keegan sauntered into the kitchen and started foraging through sacks of food. "Chickens are alive again," he said, face buried in a bag. I stared out the back window to see 10 naked, shivering chickens, 2 pecking half-heartedly in the garden, the rest squinting and staggering around extremely carefully. I went to find Gary to see what he had fed chickens that morning. It turns out we had a big bowl of corn niblets. Whoop, our power just went out.
Oh.
My light did.
Uh-oh.
Hang on. Stay tuned and I'll finish the last part of it, but I gotta go find the flashlight.
Oh, dear.
Be prepared. Oh, my.
Yep.
Okay, it didn't go out. My son turned off the light.
Oh.
I think. Did you? Yes. I was going to say, okay, now we're prepared. Where's the flashlight?
There you
I
go.
have no idea. Okay. Okay, let me see. I stare out the back window to see 10 naked, shivering chickens, 2 pecking half-heartedly in the garden, the rest squinting and staggering around carefully. I went to find out to see what he had fed the chickens that morning, and it turns out we had a big bowl of corn niblets that had gone fizzy and a half a bottle of fermented apple juice. The chickens weren't sick, they were drunk.
Oh, God.
And apparently they had really bad hangovers. Until their feathers grew back, people would drive past the house slowly, mouths gaping, staring wide-eyed at my naked flock. But they would swerve wildly, almost taking out the neighbors' bushes once the chickens got their sweaters.
I like it. They were drunk. Drunk chickens.
Yeah, you should read the book. It's just...
For sure. I'm definitely going to.
Oh, yeah, and everybody on Planet B.O.B, we will be posting links to
Awesome.
be able to buy Julie's books and things like that. And we're also going to be giving away. Julie was... yes, we're going to be giving away the set of both books. Planet B.O.B will be running some kind of contest, and she's going to get you some autographed copies to the winner.
Oh, yes.
You want these books. They are great. I mean,
Awesome. That's great.
I haven't
Thank
read
you.
the other one. Now, what is your other book about?
The other book is called The Prepper's Herbal Apothecary for Beginners. And it's basically all my personal recipes and uses for natural plants and herbs you can just grow in your garden that will take care of the majority of health issues you might find in an emergency when there's no doctors available.
Oh, that's a must. Absolutely.
And we've heard as preppers about fish antibiotics and all the rest of that, and people say, "Oh, I have to go out and buy fish antibiotics," but they don't know how to use them. So I put a little page in. I put a page in there about the most prevalent antibiotics that, if you can find them, that you should get, the dosages for adults and children, and what they should be used for.
Awesome.
Everybody
should.
Last week about rating the pet stores.
Yeah,
and how you need to be knowledgeable of, because you can overdose your children.
Oh, easily.
Well, and now, since they've been doing that prepper stuff about fish antibiotics, they're putting stuff in them
to deter you.
Yeah, to deter you. And so you have to read very carefully the ingredients, because some of them have things for, nice, healthy, long fins. Well, if you don't have fins, you probably don't want to take that one.
Yeah, probably not. Well, maybe. Why not?
Because
never know.
And you've got to be careful too. I mean, and watch for. Some people may not be allergic to regular antibiotics, but they might have a reaction to the fish antibiotics. So those are things that you have to look for, and that's all in this little book. It's very, very small, and it's only like $4 for a hardback copy. But it talks about, let me see here, I'll just open it up randomly. Dry mustard plasters, treatments for tuberculosis, homemade electrolytes. I call them herbal stitches. I call them herbal masks, but they're called herbal stitches. I got pictures of a really gross one my dog had that we used, and it took about 4 days for it to close up. Tiger balm, and then how to treat respiratory, burns, bleeding, urinary tract infections, and they're all different things.
Just give us a little spoiler. Just pick one thing at random there and tell us what it is.
Well, this one has a part on essential oils. It has a part on foods. Okay, well, everybody knows about garlic. Okay, so I'll read garlic. It says safety issues. Garlic may alter the function on prescription medications. So if you're being treated with blood thinners, medications, aspirin, warfarin, don't use garlic without speaking to your health care provider. Also, people using protease inhibitors such as HIV treatments should consult a doctor before using garlic. That's a rule of thumb with just about anything. And you guys, if you plan on doing this stuff, check with your doctor now before shit hits the fan, because then you're aware. Pick out, what we used to do was pick out things that our family had. I don't have a lot of illness. We have allergies and things like that, but that's about it. But say I had a diabetic, I would go online and I would research naturopathic treatments for diabetes, and then I would look at everything, and then I would research it and find which things I could grow in my garden for it, which things I would want to keep on hand, that sort of thing. And then, anyway, it says garlic is used to fight some forms of cancer. It's an antibiotic, an antifungal, an anti-inflammatory. It prevents many forms of cancers: colon, stomach, rectal, prostate, and lung. Controls high blood pressure, high cholesterol, heart disease, and hardening of the arteries. Some other treatments may include treatments of fevers, headaches, diabetes, snake bites, stress, liver function, bronchitis, sinus congestion, ringworm, and jock itch. So those are, and so there's a chapter of that, and then there's recipes in the back using things. But once again, it's very, very, very basic for beginners. But what I was going to do with it, I was going to make an app out of it so you could put it on your phone.
Oh, cool.
And so if you were...
That's an excellent idea.
So if shit hits the fan, you'd have at least the power. If you could keep your phone charged, you could pull it up.
You know what? But you know what? And Michelle has said this from the beginning. Get out there and know your plants. Know what you can use. Because that's going to, like you said, the shit hits the fan. You're going to have to know. So now's the time to do it. Yeah, absolutely. And what's
and not just your there's so many things you can even grow inside your house on a windowsill that people don't understand.